Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Be sure and hit like and subscribe. Remember, the subscriptions are free. But wanted to shoot a video today. It's kind of rainy and dreary, going to be that way all weekend long, and kind of reflects the mood that I'm in. I'm going to make a trip today that I wanted to make for several years, but this will be the last chance that I would get to do that. Many of you in the southeast, if you follow NASCAR, you know that the Winston Cup Museum in Winston Salem, North Carolina, is closing as of December the 16th. You can look at Stapleton 42, Stapleton Motor Works. Mitch has got a very in-depth and detailed video about what's going on and what's there. This is the only day that I've got that's going to give me an opportunity to go up. So we're going to make a little bonsai run, do some videoing, take some pictures, maybe talk to Mr. Spencer and a few other people that are up there, and try to explain the significance of this museum. We do not know what the next step's going to be. We know the brick and mortar side of it will be going away. Most of the cars, if not all, are going to auction, and this is something this man's been working on probably since like 1982-3, somewhere along in there. Again, it's explained very well in Mitch's his video, but again, I just wanted to take the time for my viewers and my subscribers to do a walkthrough and kind of see the era of NASCAR that I can relate to, the late 60s, early 70s, up into the 80s. Now, a lot of the 90s cars are up there, and that's when there was a lot of prototypes and things going on with the cars and swapping around, and quite frankly, during that time is when I began to kind of step away, just because I just did not like the way that the sport was going. But change is inevitable. Unfortunately, this museum will be going away, but I wanted to take an opportunity for those of you who, number one, hadn't heard of it, and number two, had never seen it, get a walkthrough, get an opportunity to see kind of like what it was and those things that took place to get NASCAR where it is today. Again, hit like and subscribe. The subscribe button greatly helps our channel, and subscriptions again are free, so just always keep that in mind. And with that being said, let's get on the road. Okay guys, we have made it to Winston-Salem, about an hour and a half up the road. We're going to go in and just see what we got, see what we run into. I appreciate you being along for the ride and spending a little time on the channel. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe. Thank you very much. Many of the cars, like this Dodge here, has a placard standing by it or in front of it explaining what the car was all about and what it did during its life out on the track or around the track. So going forward in the video, when you see a picture of the car, the next picture will be that of the placard. So by all means, feel free to stop and hit pause, read those writings about the cars and what is being said about them, and you'll get a better understanding of the significance of that vehicle and exactly how much Winston meant to Winston Cup racing during this time. Here are the signatures, autographs of three legendary drivers of NASCAR: Bobby Allison, Richard Petty, and of course Buddy Baker. All three of these drivers at some point in time, for some reason, drove the Dodge previously that you were looking at.
Hi, my name's Colbert Seagraves. I'm the Executive Director of the Winston Cup Museum in Winston Salem, North Carolina. My father was Ralph Seagraves, the gentleman that worked for R.J. Reynolds, who started the Winston Cup back in 1971. The way that everything got started, Junior Johnson approached my father about a sponsorship for his race team. The tobacco industry had been banned from TV and radio advertising by the government in 1969, had an abundant supply of money to spend. So my dad asked him how much he needed. Junior told my dad he needed $150,000. My dad laughed and said, "Well, I got $70 million. What else have you got?" So Junior sent my dad to Bill France Sr., and basically they struck the deal where Winston became the series sponsor. They sponsored the points fund, the Winston Cup. Richard Petty was the first Winston Cup champion in 1971, and they also sponsored the Winston 500 in Talladega and the Winston Western 500 in Riverside, California. Basically, it's snowballed from there. Winston sponsored drag racing, NHRA, IHRA. They sponsored the grassroots Winston Racing Series, which is about 110 tracks at the biggest point that NASCAR sanctioned, weekly tracks around the country. So the Winston sponsorship lasted for 33 years.
This museum is about that era, from 1971 to 2003. I was in NASCAR from I was with the team from 1994 to 2003, but I was working in NASCAR from the early 80s. So that's why I wanted to come here. Because if you guys are going to be here and see it, you might as well get the history. You may not be here.
The engine you see here is the Ford 351 Cleveland. This is campaigned as a 358 in NASCAR. Pay very close attention to the stat sheet that'll follow this picture. Notice the difference in cubic inch versus horsepower and torque compared to the Gen 2 Chevrolet that you'll see later in the video. A little side note, the lack of this particular motor, the mid-size V8 as opposed to the 289 or the 302,
the lack of this particular motor in 1966 after Carroll Shelby went and beat Ferrari, and I think we've all probably seen the movie, the fact that Ford did not have this particular motor available to put into the Mustang in 1966 was one of the biggest reasons Carroll Shelby stepped away from Ford and wound up taking a little bit of a hiatus in North Africa, completely stepped away from racing altogether. So again, this is a Cleveland 351. Pay very close attention to the stat sheets that will follow this picture. This particular car was used as a tribute car to honor Davey Allison after his passing. This car was owned by Wendell Scott. He was the first African-American driver in NASCAR. Wendell started his career March the 4th, 1961 in Spartanburg, South Carolina. That's just 2 years after NASCAR got started in 1959. Wendell won his first and only race December the 1st, 1963 in Jacksonville, Florida at Speedway Park. As with many underfunded drivers back in those days, they would typically only run the large tracks, and this particular car was running at Talladega when it was involved in a wreck that basically took out the left side. This particular car was probably the best car that Wendell ever owned. It is an old Holman Moody car. The crash at Talladega in 1963 that this car was involved in was basically, for the most part, the end of the career of Wendell Scott. He sustained not necessarily life-threatening injuries, but the financial setback that it caused him, plus the downtime. He did race some after that, but not nearly as successful it was during that 2-year period. As you can tell, compared to the cars of today, this thing was certainly antiquated, but think about it, guys, that this was actually state-of-the-art for the time. Holman Moody, at that point in time, for a Ford product, was building the best race car on the circuit, and they were actually a manufacturing facility building race cars that you could compare to Ford Motor Company building street cars or Chevrolet or anyone else. So certainly an old-looking car, but at that point in time, it was probably one of the best-made cars out there. This is one of the Chevrolets that Jeff Gordon and the Rainbow Warriors, under the direction of Ray Evernham, won the Winston Million. For those of you who are not familiar with that program during the time that it was going on in NASCAR, if any one driver in any particular season could win 3 out of the 4 big races, which would be Talladega, Daytona, Charlotte, and Darlington, they were given or awarded an extra $1 million. A little bit of history here is Bill Elliott was the very first driver to win the Winston Million. Out of Dawsonville, Georgia. Awesome Bill from Dawsonville, or in this case, $1 million Bill. In 1985, he had the single greatest season in NASCAR history during that time. He sat on 11 poles in 85. He had 11 wins. So with all of that success and that $1 million, Awesome Bill did not win the championship that year, and he had to wait until 1988 for that to be awarded to him. This is a 1996 Ford Thunderbird, campaigned or driven by Jimmy Spencer for the Winston brand. You got Joe Camel there on the hood. And in 1997, a year later, the federal government stepped in and outlawed basically any type of character advertisement on cars or anything like that, said that they were targeting children. So this particular paint scheme went away in 97, and it was replaced by the No Bull brand, which it campaigned throughout the rest of its life in 98 and 99, again driven by Jimmy Spencer. This is a Chevrolet SS built by Richard Childress Racing, driven at the time by Kevin Harvick. This is a cutaway, shows how the car is all put together, gives you an opportunity to kind of look underneath the skin, if you will. If you look at the front end of this car, the grille is quite a bit bigger, the nose is a little bit longer, and it's also laid back more as compared to the earlier Monte Carlo or the later Lumina. What we have here is the Chevrolet Gen 2 350, or in this case a 358. It did start its life out as a base block 350, but go back and compare when we get to the next frame, the cubic inch being the same, the carburetor combinations being the same, but look at the difference in horsepower and torque in those days between the Fords and Chevrolets. What you see might be surprising. This is a display setup for Matt Kenseth, obviously another Ford product, in his 2003 winning championship car. I want you to notice in the next frame the amount of money he won that year for the championship compared to what you will see as championship payouts later on in the video for people like Buddy Baker, Richard Petty, Benny Parsons. Just look at the difference in the money that those guys get now compared to back in the day. This is a cutaway of an Eagle GT. What you see here is obviously the outer tire, but the inner tire. The inner tire, in my humble opinion, is probably the second greatest safety advent or addition to the sport, other than the fuel cell itself. Obviously, the fuel cell came along after we had accidents like with Fireball Roberts at Charlotte, where he got burned and died several weeks later from his burns. You go back and look at a lot of the interviews with the older drivers like Red Farmer, the Allison brothers, Dick Brooks, those guys talking about tires blowing out, and we had the tire wars between Goodyear and Hoosier. Then NASCAR decided to go exclusively with Goodyear so they could help one company do all the R&D that they needed to make the tires safe. Again, just an incredible piece of safety here for the drivers, and there's no telling over the years with blown tires how many lives this particular device has saved. What you're seeing here is the back of a pit box. Don't know what team it came from, and it really doesn't matter. But what this is a timeline starting in 1971 and proceeding through 2003 when Winston pulled out of NASCAR racing. It's the highlights, the championship winners, paid out purses. A lot of the high points of each year is listed here. I would invite you to stop the video from time to time and read this if you've been a fan of NASCAR at any point since '71. Some of the stuff you'll read here will bring back memories, maybe things that you've forgotten about, or maybe you pick up a piece of trivia that'll stick with you. But again, it's just a breakdown from one year to the next, exactly what happened, and it further explains the deep involvement that Winston had, not only in NASCAR, but in this region, obviously since NASCAR racing started here. This is another smaller pit box that was sitting there in the floor next to the one that you just saw. And what is listed here is the names of every person that ever worked in the marketing department for R.J. Reynolds Tobacco throughout the 33-year history that Winston had with NASCAR. This is the various logos that Winston had while involved with NASCAR. And if you're like me, after seeing this picture, had forgotten one or two of these. This is a picture of Mr. Ralph Seagraves, the gentleman that had the conversation with Junior Johnson in the off-season of 1970 that wound up leading into a meeting with Bill France Sr. and the 33-year relationship between NASCAR and Winston. Sadly, as this video comes to an end, so does the Winston Cup Museum in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. I hope you have enjoyed this walk down memory lane. I certainly have enjoyed doing it and bringing it to you. If you see something here that you like or you're interested in, hit that little button down there for like and subscribe, and also the bell, and that way you can keep up with any content that we've got coming down the pipe. And as always, God bless.